Hi, everybody. Lights, Camera, Accolade is back with you, and we're here to observe Native American History Month for the month of November. This gave us quite a few options to choose from this month, but we went ahead and focused in on an early documentary movie, which proved to be a trailblazer in more ways than one. I'm talking about Nanook of the North, which some of you film buffs, specifically those into documentary films, may be aware of. It was a real important early example of this genre of film. So we had a great time talking about it. We hope you enjoy our little piece of our discussion here in this free preview. But as always, if you'd like to listen to the whole entire episode, just become a supporter of ours by visiting patreon.com/lights, camera, accolade.
I think the thing that, to say honest about this very gently staged, aggressively staged, not quite documentary. But I think the thing that's most interesting to me about this, other than the fact that, it's very cool that they went out here and documented these people and kind of were collaborating with them to make this, I guess, story really, is for me, it really raises questions of like, okay, so we know that a bunch of this stuff is staged. I think it's so interesting to think about how much credit we give modern documentaries or the documentary genre in terms of how much of that we're being presented is real. I know that there are more strict standards for documentaries now, but it's always that thing of how much of any documentary is really talking to you as the audience and presenting information to you as an audience. And it's, it's still the magic of filmmaking in terms of like what you are choosing to capture on camera and what you're choosing to edit into something and what you're and like what order you're presenting things. So even though now we have, stricter guidelines on what qualifies as a legit documentary versus, like there's a word for it that's like the fake documentaries, right? Like the example is the Spinal Tap movie, right?
Mockumentary.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about that in terms of a allegedly non-fictional piece of art. And it's like, maybe, and this is a bad example of it being non-fictional because like we know that it's not, or that it's been specifically like crafted to tell a story. But just thinking how much of reality is really translated through the camera and how it's presented to an audience.
It's so interesting that elements of what we are used to in documentaries of today, and that goes even for some reality shows, which are obviously very scripted,
right,
but are presented similarly as like, this is just someone behind a camera capturing real life.
Reality TV is a great comparison.
And it was so weird to see, again, a lot of the things that are familiar today here. And in a way, I feel like it was really groundbreaking for 1922, because something that we see and what I always ask myself is like, when did they have time to set the camera up here? Or like, why, things like that. And that was already happening here, where you would get close shots and long shots. And some of that's going to be editing, but some of it is like, okay, they clearly want the shot of them tracking across the snow. So they're going to take the time to go up that hill to set up this camera. And they're like, wait, don't walk yet. What is the direction for these people?
And this man's got one camera, he's not hauling two of them around. So.
Right. So that was just something while watching it was easy to be aware of, because it's so familiar even in documentaries of today. Though documentaries of today, especially like nature documentaries, you normally have multiple cameras set up, right? So you can kind of be like, oh, it's editing. But back at this time, when it was very likely to just be one camera, then it's like, man, this is very intentionally capturing these certain things or having people wait to start certain actions, so it makes it a little bit more clear how intentional what you're talking about is, right? Like of what to show.
I think anytime you're involved in filmmaking, there's that impulse to manufacture some degree of narrative or some reason to draw an audience in. And so not to, absolve our director, Mr. Flaherty, of his heavy hand in the direction of the reality he's putting on. But, I at least appreciate the fact that, and you could say some of the language he uses is somewhat condescending towards their culture throughout, that idea of like a
the inner
noble
titles,
savage. But overall, the feeling I got was actually a respect for that way of life, and almost an admiration for its purity and its toughness. And I appreciated that. I think about the time period this came out in the early 1920s. Flaherty was an American. Ku Klux Klan is taking off. Obviously, the plight of indigenous Americans and black people were very intensive, and other groups in the United States. So progressive, really, in a way, to even think to make a film like this. And I thought that the cultural condescension while there was somewhat minimal, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I think probably Flaherty and most people who watch this at the time and even afterwards speak more to its cultural or historical significance. And especially at the time when you are so far removed from these cultures and you likely will never come across them in your daily life. It's not so much a travelogue like certain things that we've seen things take after, right? It is more of a introduction to a very different but very ultimately kind of cool way of life. I mean, we compare this, right, to Trader Horn, right? Where it's like that narrative that they're choosing to like weave in, and then simultaneously having those travelogue elements is very different. This at least attempted to be a story potentially about this culture that could theoretically actually be a true story that happened in this culture,
Right.
It just happens to be acted out. So like it's in that weird intersection of like, this is a historical fiction type movie, but documentary style, But I am glad the two parts that I was like, okay, for sure, this seems scripted. The gramophone, when he like bites onto the record or whatever, that was definitely meant to be a comical scene. Inuit people at that point very much knew what gramophones were, right? They had like come across them in meeting people from Western culture and stuff.
Scene ends and he's putting in an iPod in his ears.
Exactly. And then the scene where they were hunting the seal under the ice through the breathing hole, and he was like fighting with the cable the whole time.
You could tell
they had fed the line through somewhere else so someone else could be pulling on it for that scene to create the drama, right, of the struggle for the hunt and stuff. But apparently when they screened it for Inuit people, most of them started laughing because they were like, okay, this is so clearly staged and not how those hunts and stuff go.
Like, do you even harpoon, bro? Nanook a chum.
But yeah, from everything that I've seen, and this kind of tracks with what I learned about, we'll call it Flaherty's style of getting to know everyone before fashioning a narrative and starting filming, is that it seems like he would very likely make friends and be very friendly with the people there, and probably collaborate to some extent on what to film or how to film certain things. Some of the Inuit people knew more about the cameras than he did, like this specific type of camera.
Incredible. Love that.
But that was what they kept calling or referring to as the Aggie, was what they were calling the camera. The igloo scene, while I think the coolest scene in the movie, and the most interesting, the camera was too big to get into the igloo. It kept collapsing when they tried to make it large enough. So for the interior scenes, those were actually like, they just built one without the ceiling because then
like
it was also too dark. Yeah, they did like a half sort of thing for it.
Isn't that interesting? If you change the dimensions at all, it doesn't work.
Yeah. It's such a delicate sort of balance, which I know, Jake, you could talk to, but I guess from stories from filming, apparently the average igloo is usually about 12 feet in diameter, but for the dimensions they needed to fit the camera in there, it had to be 25 feet. So a little more than double the size that they normally are. So the story, and I'm just, this is straight from Wikipedia because this is where we're doing our research.
Don't tell them that.
Okay, sorry. Okay,
cut it out.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just want everyone to know I didn't dig deep
Sarah
for this.
knows this.
This is
It's like
right.
we all
this is
know everything
from the
we
top
say.
of my dome. So Nanook and his companions started to build the biggest igloo of their lives. For 2 days they worked, the women and children helping them. Then came the hard part, to cut insets for 5 large slab ice windows without weakening the dome. They had hardly begun when the dome fell into pieces to the ground. Never mind, said Nanook. I can do it next time. For 2 days more, they worked, but again, the same result. As soon as they began setting in the ice windows, their structure fell to the ground. It was a huge joke by this time, and holding their sides, they laughed their misfortune away. Again, Nanook began on the big Aggie igloo, but this time women and children hauled barrels of water on sledges and iced the walls as they went up. Finally, the igloo was finished, and they stood eyeing it as okay, this is so Flaherty, come on. And they stood eyeing it as satisfied as so many small children over a house of blocks. They just did something incredibly difficult. And you're like, just like kids with a block house, like get over yourself. But the light wasn't good enough. So they ended up just doing the half dome instead. But that was the story of the igloo, though. Also didn't know that igloos, and I don't know if all igloos, like if they make windows for all of them by cutting out ice, or if that was just the attempt so that they would have the lighting interior for
I looked it up because I was like, sure, is this stage 2? But no, apparently windows are a thing in igloos.
That's so cool.
Maybe not all of them, but oftentimes.
Yeah. Man, it's so cool.
I like how you say, Jake, you can speak to the igloos when in reality, you know that I like autistically watched a YouTube video about igloos and was like acting like I knew about igloos while we watched it. But here's the thing, audience. They're so interesting. This is
super
a
cool
mode of dwelling that's existed. I don't know that any historian has been able to pinned down, because how could you, when it was originally incepted? But suffice to say, from time immemorial, as long as people have been living in that region, they've been building this igloo temporary dwelling design that they sort of stumbled upon it. You know, that Michelangelo had to work for years to study old Roman domes in order to build St. Peter's Dome and get the proportions right. And here we have that happening on a smaller scale, not because they had mathematics or tools to measure it, but because of trial and error and the iron will of human beings to survive difficult circumstances. And for that reason, I just think they're so amazing. And they're all designed in the same exact way and all finalized with a very important stone right at the top, that if they get the wrong size or they lay it wrong, it can cause the whole thing to collapse. So quite an art form, and so neat to see it in as authentic as I've ever seen it in this film. Now, what must be mentioned about the Igloo saga is the fact that the dogs very much do not get an igloo.
They don't.
And the movie closing towards the end, you see the dogs outside, snow just pelting their fur, them basically turning into little snowmen before finally curling into balls near each other in the cold, windy night on the frozen tundra. And I just kept thinking to myself, how do these dogs live? I can't imagine it. I felt so bad. But apparently, as Sarah said after we watched it, that was the norm.
Yeah, allegedly. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think the dogs wrote this, but they are acclimated to the snow. And if they get too used to like the warmer interiors, they won't work as well in the cold. So they like it. Okay. That's pretty much what they're trying to say.
They certainly liked it when they were chucking hunks of bloody seal flesh at the dogs. They liked that a lot.
Yeah. There is apparently, I don't know if it's good or not, but there is a 1994 movie called Kablunak, which is the word for white person as the title, which is a movie about the making of Nanook of the North. Charles Dance plays Robert Flaherty. I know him mostly from Game of Thrones as Tywin Lannister.
Yes.
But kind of really interested in that because we just watched this. And had I known this existed, maybe we would have been crazy and done a double feature. But I didn't. So good for you guys to not have to watch 2 movies.